Well, there it is. Another day, another big New York Jets news story as Joe Douglas is out as general manager of the New York Jets. The Jets chose the bye week to make this decision at 3-8 with 6 more games left to go. Joe Douglas is no longer the general manager of the Jets. 2 in-season firings. Joe Douglas gets canned in Robert Saleh gets canned in week 5. Joe Douglas gets canned in week 12. Not how anyone assumed this season was going to go going into the 2024 season with the highest expectations in a really, really long time. Both the general manager and the head coach do not make it through the season. So Joe Douglas ends his almost 6-year tenure with the New York Jets with a 30-64 record for a .319 win percentage. Now, this is a complicated story. There is no denying that it's not as black and white as he was bad, which he wasn't good enough is basically the end of the day, right? Like, there were a lot of Joe Douglas defenders, even till the very bitter end, but it's hard to ignore 30-64. It's hard to ignore a .319 win percentage, and it's hard to ignore the leash that he got. He got into a 6th season without sniffing or coming anywhere close to a playoff spot. The narrative around the Jets is they give up or there's too much turnover with this team. The leash that these guys get is actually crazy. Robert Saleh got into year 4. Joe Douglas got into year 6. Todd Bowles was the head coach here for 4 seasons. Same thing with Mike McCagnon. He was the general manager for 4 seasons. The only time they acted quickly was after they moved on from John Idzik after 2. Other than that, guys have been here a really long time. So this all started on a messed up timeline to begin with because Joe Douglas was brought in before the start of the 2019 season, but after the free agency period and the NFL draft. So they let Mike McCagnon spend money in free agency and then have a draft class, and then they fired him before the start of this season. Just unreal idiocy there, number one. So then really his first true offseason and draft and free agency, all that came in 2020, and the Jets famously went 2-14 that season and then ended up trading Sam Darnold and drafting Zach Wilson. And there are some good things to come out of Joe Douglas's tenure as the New York Jets or with the New York Jets. There are positives to talk about with Joe Douglas. One, some of his trades that he made. The Jamal Adams trade got insane value on. The 22 draft class with Sauce Gardner, Garrett Wilson, Jermaine Johnson, Breece Hall. Really good draft class. But at the end of the day, it was nowhere close to enough for this team to start getting in the right direction and winning football games. It only counts on paper for so long, right? Like eventually you have to see the results on the football field, and we never got that. For me, the bad goes to, or the beginning of the bad. There are a lot of things that Joe Douglas did that frustrated me, especially at the end. I thought last year not being aggressive enough for a quarterback after Aaron Rodgers goes down was a very big mistake. I thought how he dismantled the defensive line this year before the start of the season was a very big mistake. Was vocal about both things at the time, and both seemed like absolute disasters. But really, the beginning of the end was missing on Mekhi Becton and Zach Wilson. So he got bold in his first draft and decided to take Mekhi Becton over Tristan Wirfs. He went for a home run swing, and it was a surprise to everyone. I mean, that was the first year we live streamed the draft, and all of us pretty much were talking about Tristan Wirfs being the pick here. And then Mekhi Becton's name was called, and we're all like, oh, okay. And there's some things to like about Becton, but he's a risky player. And their monster swing came up short. He got hurt and was never the same player again after his rookie season. Then with Zach Wilson, they missed poorly on the 2nd overall pick at quarterback. The 2 most important positions in the sport, essentially, are your quarterback number 1, and left tackle is also insanely important. Sure, there's other ones. You need a number 1 receiver, edge rusher, corner, like all that stuff. Yes. But it's hard to be a good team without a good left tackle and good quarterback. And Joe Douglas missed very, very badly on that. And because of the miss on Zach Wilson, they had to go out and trade for Aaron Rodgers. And because of the miss of Mekhi Becton, they had to sign Tyron Smith and then draft Olu Fashanu this year. And they were playing catch up pretty much for 4 years, and they were never able to get there. Joe Douglas also hired the coach that everyone hated in Robert Saleh. Saleh was the scapegoat for a lot of people, and I agree. Robert Saleh was not a very good head coach. I will be the first one to tell you that, and I don't blame the Jets for firing him in season, but nobody gave Joe Douglas any slack for hiring, or nobody gave him any grief for hiring the guy. It was, he's a bad coach. You got to let him hire another coach. Do you? Because he made some of the biggest mistakes at the most important spots. Left tackle, quarterback, head coach, missed badly on all three of those spots. And now, to me, this is the Woody Johnson show. We are going to see the Woody Johnson show the rest of this way. It's been that way for a while. My line was that Joe Douglas quiet quit this year, and that's kind of how it felt because we didn't see him do all that much. Woody Johnson went over him to fire Robert Saleh. Not a good sign. Talked about that at the beginning. Not that I disagreed with the firing, but just the optics of the owner going above the GM or around the GM is not a good thing. It's not. Then they traded for Devontae Adams. Then they signed Hassan Reddick, and Woody Johnson was involved in all that. And this is big because now this offseason, they're looking for a new general manager. They're looking for a new head coach. And Woody Johnson very well could be going overseas to be the ambassador of the UK again during the Trump administration, just like he was during the 2016 to 2020 era. And as a result, the Jets had Christopher Johnson, who was the one that hired Adam Gase, was the one that waited to fire Mike McCagnon, had those awful jerseys. Like, just everything that seemed to go wrong for this franchise was highlighted under Christopher Johnson's watch. And it's just another piece to the puzzle that is this absolute disaster, this absolute mess the Jets have been in for 15 years. This is the team with the longest active playoff drought in the 4 professional sports in North America. And I don't know when it's going to come to an end. I really don't. I thought this would be the year. And I said before the year, if they're not making the playoffs, you have to move on from Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh. And they did before they were technically officially eliminated. But at 3-8, your season's over. Well, we're going to have a lot of time to talk about who the new general manager is going to be, who the new head coach is going to be, what the Jets should do at quarterback, which they should do in free agency, in the draft, and this and that. And it's the end of an era today. An unfortunate one, a sign where an era where there were signs of positivity, and you thought maybe this would finally be the guy to get them back on track. But 6 years, no playoff appearances, a winning percentage of .319, and an exit. That's what it is for Joe Douglas. Guys, that'll do it for me in this one. Let me know your thoughts on the firing. I'm Matt O'Leary, and I'll catch you next time.